Hey guys, this is the MMA Breakdown, doing predictions today for UFC 190, Rousey versus Correia, taking place in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, August 1st. Follow me on Twitter, link in the description, at MMA Breakdown 0. UFC 190, I'll say this is an okay card. I'm not gonna trash it too much. The pay-per-view card, there are a lot of fun matchups. I actually think they're going to be exciting fights, but they're not relevant. You have the two finale fights from the Tough Brazil 4 finale on the main card that they threw on here. This was those fights were supposed to take place, I think, at the Machida Romero card back in June. And they threw them on here, so now we have a 7-fight pay-per-view card, which, I don't know. I'm not too crazy about it. I think the last time they did that was UFC 144 in Japan. But other than those finale fights and, one fight opening the main card, Gadella versus Aguilar, and the title fight in the main event, this is kind of like, Brazilian legends, kind of trophy fights, guys at the end of the road. And, it's going to be fun, but I want to see more relevant fights, and I just don't think that's a great use of pay-per-view, but, no one really cares, I guess. And then the prelim card, I think it's actually pretty strong, especially the Damian Maia versus Neil Magny fight. That's definitely pay-per-view worthy. Should be the co-main event, actually. By far the second best fight on this card, other than the title fight, and most relevant. But still, top to bottom, the prelim card is not bad. Better than your typical prelim card for pay-per-view or Fox Sports 1 fight nights. Alright, well, let's get right into it. Starting off with the Fight Pass preliminary card at Bantamweight, Hugo Viana versus Guido Cannetti. Hugo Viana, a veteran of Tough Brazil 1. An aggressive striker, throws a lot of volume, throws a lot of kind of wild strikes, not very technical or composed in his striking. Lost to Aljamain Sterling in his last fight. The fight was fairly even, and then in the third round, Sterling was able to get on top of him and rain down some big ground and pound, put him out. Had some wins over forgettable guys. I think all three of his wins actually in the UFC were over guys who aren't in the UFC anymore, and also has a TKO loss to TJ Dillashaw. So he's been a little inconsistent. I do think he's a little better than your average product from Tough Brazil or any tough season. I think he's a little better than your kind of run of the mill guy who didn't make it to the finals. And then Guido Cannetti, veteran of Tough Latin America. The guy's not a good fighter. Just there's no two ways about it. Was destroying Henry Briones in his last fight, UFC 180, the finale for the show. Was destroying him, hurt him to the body, chasing him down, all over him. Briones comes back with one punch and ends the whole thing. He was also knocked out on the show by the eventual winner, Alejandro Perez, and also lost a fight before that on the show. I think it was Marcos Beltran, and I think he felt he was robbed. I think I scored that fight for Beltran, though I can't quite remember. But he made a big deal about it in the house, and he was always getting in this guy's face, telling him that he should have won that fight. But I got to go with Viana. Just seems like the more talented fighter, and I think is going to hurt him on the feet. They're going to exchange, and Viana's going to come out on top. So I'll go with Viana by TKO. All right, next up at middleweight, Vitor Miranda versus Clint Hester. Another matchup with two veterans of Tough. Vitor Miranda from Tough Brazil 3. Clint Hester, Tough 17. And Vitor Miranda made it to the finale, lost to Antonio Carlos Jr., got out-wrestled, outworked, and just looked kind of disinterested in there. Seemed to have a big athletic disadvantage against Carlos Jr., and then in his last fight against Jake Collier, was getting out-wrestled, controlled for the entirety of the first round. And I think with under a minute left, he got back to his feet, landed a head kick that wobbled him and put him out from there. So have a nice comeback win, but clearly struggles on the ground off of his back. And then Clint Hester, the guy is really an athletic, he's an athletic workhorse. He's got a big motor, throws a lot of volume, but he kind of blows his wad in the first round. And coming off of Tough, he was able to get some impressive wins. He had an elbow knockout over Bristol Marunde, and that was it actually for his impressive performances. Had decision wins over Andy Yenz, Antonio Braganetto, and then got finished by Robert Whittaker in his last fight, and just showed that he doesn't have the technical striking to hang with these more polished and high-level strikers. I think Hester is going to come out strong, win early, but I don't expect him to be able to keep that up. And Miranda, I think, is better than these other guys that Hester hasn't been able to put away. Better than Enns and Antonio Braganetto. I think he's down the stretch he's going to have more gas in the tank, and overall I think he's just the more skilled kickboxer. So I got to go with Miranda here. All right, moving on to the Fox Sports 1 prelims at bantamweight, Yuri Alcantara versus Leandro Issa. This should be a really good fight, and I think it could be another showcase fight for Alcantara. Coming off of a tough setback to Frankie Saenz in his last fight, just out of nowhere, fought this, he wasn't a newcomer then, but just coming off of a fight that was buried on a Fox Sports 2 prelim card, and lost to Frankie Saenz. But I think Alcantara has a big advantage here against Issa. Issa isn't a bad fighter. It was kind of weird seeing him get choked out by Russell Doan by a triangle choke. Him being the decorated jiu-jitsu guy. And, they got in a brawl. It was a scrap. But ended up getting choked out by Doan. And his next fight against Jumabayek Terzin looked better. Was landing leg kicks on the feet, and then was able to get to the ground and submitted him with an armbar. And then against Yuta Sasaki, who I think was really exposed, and in hindsight the win probably doesn't mean as much as it did when it happened. But against Sasaki, was able to completely impose his wrestling and grappling game, dragged him to the ground, and just outclassed him from there. Eventually submitted him with it says neck crank here, but I think just a rear naked choke. I could see Issa giving Alcantara problems if he gets on top, rides out top position. Alcantara is really too comfortable to play guard sometimes, like he was against Frankie Saenz. Spends a little too much time on his back, but other than that, I don't see that being likely. Other than that, I think Alcantara just has a huge athletic and speed advantage on the feet. This guy has had several fights where he just blows through guys right from the opening bell, comes out really aggressive. His finishes over Iliardi Santos, Pedro Nobre, just comes out hot out of the gate. And the knockout of Von Lee also has power in his hands. really jumps on the back quickly on the ground. And I think Alcantara is going to get a finish here. So I'll go with Alcantara. Yeah, I think he can finish second round. All right, next up at welterweight, Worley Alves versus Nordine Taleb. Again, two veterans of Tough. Taleb from Tough Nations and also tried out for Tough 19 and didn't make it past the fights to get into the house, so didn't even make it on the season. I think this is a bit of a mismatch. Worley Alves was one of these guys from the winner of Tough Brazil 3. Clearly head and shoulders better than everyone else on that show. Finished both of his fights in the house. I think one was by guillotine, and the other, I think he hurt the guy with a flying knee or knocked him out with a knee. And then in the finale, guys went over Marcio Alexandre Jr., submitted him, I think, in the third round, and then had a tough fight with Alan Jouban. Some people scored it for Jouban, but I think I scored it for Alves. A really athletic guy, a good striker, good submissions, just really green and really young. And Nordine Taleb, I think he's been getting better. Looked pretty limited coming into the UFC. His win over Vic Grujic, it was a wrestling clinic. Just took him down all day, but didn't really do any damage with the ground and pound. It was kind of a lay and pray performance. But then his wins over Li Jingliang, he showed a pretty crisp jab. Outboxed him, and then his last fight against Chris Clements really relied on the wrestling again and took him down. Seems to not really have the killer instinct. I think against Clements he really could have finished him if he just opened up with ground and pound and went after the finish, but that seems to be his weakness really. But Worley Alves, I think, will just have a big athletic advantage on the feet, has more power in his shots, and if they get into a wrestling battle, I see Alves winning that all day as well. And on the ground, I think he is definitely the more proven submission threat. So, going to go with Worley Alves here. I think it'll be a fairly dominant performance. All right, next up at light heavyweight, Rafael Cavalcante versus Patrick Cummins. Rafael Cavalcante, to me, this guy's really been a disappointment since coming over from Strikeforce. Lost to Dan Henderson in a fight he was winning. I think he had Henderson hurt at one point in that fight, and got hit with the H-bomb, went down, and then got pounded out, got finished off. Then coming to the UFC, got knocked out by Thiago Silva, where he was doing well early and then just kind of fell apart, and everyone really criticized him for that. Had a nice TKO win over Igor Pokrajec, but that guy's not really he's not in the UFC anymore. Was never really a high level talent. And then his last fight against Ryan Bader, got out hustled and really looked like he trained hard for that fight. Just that was just my take on it. Got outstruck on the feet by Bader, which is not a good sign, and then lost the takedown battle. Was getting taken down over and over in that fight. He has power, but it seems like he really relies on just that. And I always remember, I think it was UFC, was it 148? I think Sonnen versus Silva 2, and he was in Silva's camp, and they were doing the open workouts in Vegas, and I think he was doing like slap boxing with Steven Seagal, and he was getting slapped around, and he looked like he was terribly out of shape, and I just always remember that. And I have no idea how he trains for his fights, but I just have that image in my mind. And then when I've seen his last couple of fights, to me, I see the connection between those two things. Just doesn't seem like he's he fights too hard, and I don't know. I think it might be because he's not really committed to training. That's just what his fights look like to me. But so I'm taking Patrick Cummins here. Cummins, I think, got exposed in his last fight by OSP. He just doesn't have the striking to compete with anyone good yet. But his wrestling is there. He's a big, strong, hulking guy, and I think that's going to be enough to beat Cavalcante. Vieira was able to get him down, and Cummins, I don't think, is the athletic, more technical wrestler that Bader is, but I think he's big and strong enough where he can just drag down Cavalcante and stay on top of him and just work his methodical ground and pound. So taking Cummins to win a decision here. I don't see Cavalcante as a guy really that's going to move up the ranks even in a weak division like light heavyweight. Just doesn't seem like he has that fire. So going with Cummins. All right, next up, and I'm going to dub this fight. I already said this is the second best fight on the card, but I'm going to dub this fight the People's Main Event, because that's really what it should be and deserves to be. This is an amazing fight. It's completely flying under the radar because it's on the prelims and all the other events that are going on. I don't think a lot of people realize that this fight is taking place, but this is a very, very important fight. It really the perfect test for Neil Magny, who's been on this real tear, and I'll admit it. Before his last fight against Hyun-Gyu Lim, he was on a tear, and I thought he really had improved since his time on The Ultimate Fighter. I mean, I don't think people realize I watched all the seasons of The Ultimate Fighter. I don't think other people really remember this guy getting knocked out cold by Mike Ricci in the semifinals in the house, Tough 16. Got hit with some nasty standing elbows and just got put out cold. And also lost to Seth Baczynski in the UFC, and Sergio Moraes also, and just turned that around, went on this tear. But he didn't beat anyone any good in that stretch. It was fighting William Macario from Tough Brazil 3 or 2, and that guy just got knocked out in his last fight. But then his last fight against Hyun-Gyu Lim, I thought that was such an impressive performance, especially after getting into some trouble on the feet. He was able to come back from that. And on the ground, this guy has really become a slick grappler, and I think that makes this matchup against Maia very interesting. But the way he was able to just get back control once it hit the ground, and has this really kind of deceptive ground and pound where it doesn't look very violent, but it's just kind of he keeps up this consistent pace with it, and doesn't look like he's doing a lot of damage, but finishes guys, and finished off Hyun-Gyu Lim with that ground and pound. So a very impressive performance by Magny there, and I really think he crossed a new threshold after that fight. Damian Maia, though, I think when he fought Ryan LaFleur, I picked him to lose that fight. Wasn't a good pick, looking back at it. But I think with that fight, he really still proved, this guy's wrestling is still as good as it's ever been, and probably it's better now. His takedowns, and really had an easy time controlling LaFleur on the ground. Gave that last round away. Was really exhausted, and faded in the McDonald fight as well. But Maia's still I don't want to say a gatekeeper, but he's still able to compete with those top guys, and still a legit test for anyone there. I was really impressed in the McDonald fight. He was able to get McDonald down and almost finished him with ground and pound in that first round. But Maia has takedowns, and that's been Magny's weakness. Got out-wrestled, out-grappled by Seth Baczynski. Sergio Moraes was able to get him to the ground and submitted him with the triangle choke. And even his fight against Rodrigo de Lima, he got mounted in that first round and was stuck in mount the whole time. and he almost got finished with a mounted triangle, I think. Also against Alex Garcia, struggled with the grappling. Kiichi Kunamoto was able to take him down as well, and beat Kunamoto. The Alex Garcia fight, I actually thought he was lucky to get away with a decision win there, but I think if he's having trouble on the ground with those guys, even though against Kyungyu Lim he shows he can take the back and be a very dangerous and capable positional grappler, I just think Maia still got the grappling chops, and he outclassed a wrestler like LaFleur. I don't know if Magny can deal with that. I don't know if he's gotten over that hump yet. So I'm going to go with Maia here. I think he takes him down, controls him on the ground for a decision. But Maia, he slips up every now and then. His last fight, like I said, against LaFleur, was dead tired in that 5th round, was just falling to his back, and could barely continue to fight. Even his fight against Alexander Yakovlev, I think Yakovlev got on top of him at the end of that fight in the 3rd round. And then against McDonald, was so dominant early, and again faded and let McDonald get back into that fight. And if Maia, starts to fade a bit here, Magny is definitely good enough to capitalize. I could see him taking the back. No one thought that Jake Shields would out-grapple Maia, and he won that fight. I could see Magny taking the back and pounding him out. I could see Maia fading down the stretch. If Maia can't get him down on the feet, I do think Magny definitely has the advantage on the feet. So it is a really competitive fight. I just think Magny just hasn't proved yet that he's shored up those holes in his ground game. So got to go with Maia here to win the decision. All right, on to the main card. 7 fights. Women's strawweight fight opening the card. Claudia Gadelha versus Jessica Aguilar. Don't really have anything to say about this fight. I've never seen Jessica Aguilar fight. I know she has a lot of hype around her as one of the top female fighters outside of the UFC. And Claudia Gadelha, seems like a good grappler. Everyone was hyping her up too coming into the UFC. I wasn't so excited when she couldn't finish. I think was it Tina Lahadamaki in her debut. Was a dominant win, got her to the ground, but couldn't come close really to finishing her. And their last fight against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, I actually thought she kind of got robbed. I scored the fight for her. Even though she wasn't successful in getting the takedown, she was able to press her up against the fence, get in on her legs, and win that battle against the fence to get dropped late in that fight. But I think Gadelha is a top women's strawweight fighter, but I really can't make a pick because I've never seen Aguilar fight, so we'll leave it at that and move on. Heavyweight fight: Antonio Bigfoot Silva versus Soa Palelei. All right, this is where the motif for this main card starts. Like I said, common theme here will be guys that need to retire and get out now. I think it's just disgusting that Bigfoot Silva is being allowed to continue to fight in the UFC. Back when Liddell was still hanging around the UFC, and Dana White, said even though he could make money off of him, he didn't want to, and really encouraged Liddell to retire. And then to see the losing streak, the knockout losing streak that Bigfoot Silva's been on, I really don't get it, and I really kind of feel disgusted, that this guy's still fighting in the UFC. His chin is just glassed at this point. He had his moment in the sun against Fedor in Strikeforce. But just think of all the punishment this guy's taken over the years. Daniel Cormier knocking him out in Strikeforce. I remember even before that, I remember the Mike Kyle fight. He ended up winning the fight and stopping Kyle, but he got dropped early in that fight. The 2 stoppages against Kane, and then just going down, his losses to in his last two fights against Frank Mir and Bigfoot Andre Arlovsky looked almost identical. Just standing right in front of them, doing nothing, not showing a jab, not using any head movement, just looking, he looks like he's just waiting for that knockout to happen. And I think at this point, Silva's just really become a punching bag, and I think almost anyone, who throws consistent volume and has some power is able to put him out. Definitely the more skilled guy than Palelei, but he just hasn't shown that, like that performance against Fedor where he really mixed up his skills, his striking, and his ground game. Hasn't shown that in a really long time. His last impressive fight was against Hunt, and it was kind of a wonder that he was able to last 5 rounds with Hunt, and now he's going down so easily. But got to go with Palelei. I just think he's going to land that punch at some point. And Palelei is certainly not a guy I see making it into the top 10 anytime soon or ever, really. But the guy does have power, especially when he gets in top position. Had those knockouts against Ruin Potts and who's the other guy? Ruin Potts and Pat Barry, where he just got on top of them and pounded away, and lost to Jared Rosholt. Rebounded with a win over Walt Harris, where he finished him. I was actually pushed a little more in that fight, but definitely has power, and I don't see Silva being able to deal with that at all. Again, his chin is just completely gone at this point. Definitely going with Palelei here for the knockout, first or second round. All right, next up at heavyweight, Stefan Struve versus Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira. Another fight that it's just really kind of sad to think about. Stefan Struve, I'm not going to say he should retire yet. If he can return to old form, I think he definitely belongs. He should still fight in the UFC. But Big Nog, I don't know. The way it went down to Nelson was ugly. Got finished by Frank Mir, which is not a bad thing. But the guy's is shop worn at this point, and the loss to Fabrizio Verdum also. I'm really back and forth on this fight. On one hand, Struve has just always been this guy that has not been able to use his height or his reach effectively, has never really developed a jab, and has just always been susceptible to those big overhand haymakers. Mark Hunt put him out, Travis Brown, and then his last fight against Alistair Overeem, was really kind of he just looked really diminished to me, and he had those health problems, he had the heart troubles, and I feel like after that performance against Overeem, I think those health complications might have done him in, because Overeem, I don't even think he threw one punch on the feet, just shot in for a takedown, and when Struve was on his back and ate a couple shots, it was over. He was out. So if this stays on the feet, I do think Nogueira has the better boxing, even late into his career, has shown power, and is able to put out Schaub, almost put out Frank Mir. So I think Nogueira, definitely has a real chance of knocking out Struve, even though he got knocked out against Roy Nelson in his last fight. But if Struve can return to old form, I think people forget, this guy knocked out Stipe Miocic, had a very impressive performance there, and had a nice win streak. If Struve can fight like that, be more active on the feet, use movement and use that length, I think he could outstrike Nogueira at this point. And on the ground, I don't know. I think that's really interesting. other than Dave Herman, Nogueira hasn't submitted anyone in a long time. And, Struve is also a very good, submission artist. Wasn't submitting great guys, but, the submissions over Pat Barry, he pulled guard on LeVar Johnson, got him with the armbar. I think that could be an interesting battle on the ground. But again, I just think, the health problems, I think that kind of took too much out of Struve and, has suffered more knockouts than Nogueira. I think Nogueira is going to connect and knock him out. I just don't see Struve returning to his old form. And unfortunately, I think he gets knocked out again. So going with Big Nog by knockout. Now the two finale fights from Tough Brazil 4. And I'll say real quick, I watched Tough Brazil 4. It started last spring, and it was going on at the same time as Tough 21 here in the States. But Tough Brazil 4, I thought was just the talent of those guys completely trumped what we saw on the American season. Now, I don't think we have a guy like Kamaru Usman from this season. There wasn't really a standout guy, which you usually get with a lot of these tough seasons, especially the Brazil ones, like a Worley Alves or a Cesar Ferreira. But really, the whole roster really showed up, and I think there were only like 3 fights the whole season that went the distance, whereas on the American season, you only got 3 finishes. But I watched, all the fights, and just to me, it looked like there was a huge skill gap there, and these guys just looked, way more further along, way more developed than the guys on ATT versus Black Zillion. So I really enjoyed the season. I will be honest, though, I had a hard time remembering a lot of the fights, a lot of the details. I don't really know why. I think maybe just because there were a lot of submissions, a lot of guys, a lot of the fights kind of looked the same. I can remember them terribly well, but I do remember enough to make my picks here, at least for me. I mean, if you don't want to trust my picks, of course, don't. But I was gonna rewatch the fights, but I just couldn't. There's so many fights these days. I'm not gonna rewatch fights, and these guys here in the finale, I do remember enough, and when they really impressed me. But the first finale fight at bantamweight, Delano Lopes versus Reginaldo Vieira. Delano Lopes, he had a quick guillotine submission win in his first fight in the house. I can't remember over who, and then fought, I think it was Mateus Nicolau, I think, in the semifinals. And that was a pretty uneventful fight. Looked kind of like a point sparring match to me, not a whole lot going on. I think Lopez, barely outpointed him, but not a memorable fight. And then Reginaldo Vieira, this guy really kind of came out of nowhere and really kind of earned his spot, I felt. Wasn't a big personality or anything on the show. And actually lost his first fight to, who was it? I think it was, God, I don't even remember. I think it was Mateus, actually, the guy that Lopez ended up beating Mateus Nicolau, I think. He lost kind of a close fight to him. Didn't look too impressive. Looked like he was kind of stuck at range the whole time, not really throwing with any confidence on the feet. And then replaced the guy who left the show because he was injured, Giovanni, and then won against Mateus Matos, and looked like he really improved. Threw a lot more volume, was able to find the mark with a lot of his strikes. Had some decent grappling, decent striking, and just looked a lot better. And then in the semifinals fight, he fought Bruno Bruno Correia, who looked like he might have been an early favorite to win the whole show. I think he had a spinning back kick knockout in his fight to get into the house, and Vieira, came again with that consistent kind of forward pressure and consistent volume striking, and was able to get the guillotine submission in the second round. So I thought it was really impressive to see him lose his first fight, not looking really that good, and winning his next two fights, getting to the finale, and looks kind of limited athletically, and not really a whole lot of raw talent, but just looks like a guy who hustles and works hard and has an effective game. So I'm actually going to take Vieira here. Just seems like he has a more consistent, methodical approach than Lopes. Lopes, I think, has a better ability to finish the fight at any point. He's more opportunistic, more wild, but I just kind of like Vieira's approach. It seems like a hard worker and fights hard. And I think he's just gonna outbox Lopes here and maybe take him down a few times. And I like him to win the decision, so I'm going with Reginaldo Vieira. Then the next finale fight at lightweight, Glyco Franca versus Fernando Bruno. Glyco Franca really looked good. Had submissions in both of his wins. I can't remember who the first guy he submitted was, but I just remember him getting it to the ground when he did, and looking pretty effortless with his finish. And then in his second fight against Joaquim Silva, in the first round, his first fight, he got the finish in the second round. In this in second fight, he finished the guy in the first round, and again just got him to the ground, locked up the body triangle from the back, and subbed him out pretty effortlessly. And just looks like a really skilled, slick grappler. Fernando Bruno, kind of a big, strong, brutish guy. Really, he's a headhunter. Throws with a lot of power, but looks fairly unrefined. Got his. He looks like a guy who should be getting more knockouts than he does. I don't think he knocked out his opponent to get into the house, and he didn't finish his first fight in the house. Then fought Mike Nazareno. And I expected him to lose that fight. Was the bigger, stronger guy. Was able to stuff Nazareno's takedowns, get on top. On the feet, he was outstriking him, and just looked like the bigger, stronger guy. Had more pop in his punches, but doesn't seem like he's really able to get over that hump and finish people. And I think Franca is just more skilled on the ground. If it stays on the feet, I think Bruno has an advantage there. But Franca just looks really clean with his technique on the ground. I think he's going to get it down and get him down and submit Bruno. So I really like Franca to win this fight by submission. All right, on to the co-main event, light heavyweight, Shogun Rua versus Little Nog, Antonio Rogerio Nogueira. Another fight where I think both these guys just need to retire. Really, Nogueira, had that big break between his win over Rashad Evans and then his last fight against Anthony Johnson, and you just saw a huge drop off there. Just got walloped by Rumble Johnson. It was ugly. And that win over Rashad Evans, I mean, you can't take that away from him, but nothing happened in that fight. Rashad Evans didn't do anything. Little Nog didn't do anything. The finish over Tito Ortiz back in 2011, the knockout over Luis Kane, that was all nice, but if we're being honest, Little Nog really hasn't done anything significant in the UFC. Losses to Phil Davis and Ryan Bader. Everyone thought he lost to Jason Brills. Shogun, who I think clearly has more left in the tank. He got the knockout a couple fights ago over James Tahuna. Showed he still has power. His last two fights were ugly, though. Ovince St. Preux put him out, in the opening seconds of that fight, under a minute. He's competing well with Henderson, almost had him out of there, but, got knocked out eventually. Chael Sonnen finished this guy with a guillotine. So Shogun, who I think is just over the hill also and should get out. I mean, when I say these guys should retire, it's because I honestly just don't want to see them get hurt or continue to take punishment. But I think Hua clearly has more left in the tank and has the power. I think he's going to catch Lil Nog at some point and put him out. I just really don't see how Lil Nog can win this at all. His boxing game, he just doesn't have enough power. He doesn't throw enough volume. Got to go with Shogun. All right, and the main event for the women's bantamweight title, Ronda Rousey versus Bethe Correia. This fight is not one bit competitive in my mind, and I don't know where along the line people got the sense that Bethe Correia was a legitimate threat or even a worthy contender to Ronda Rousey. It's really weird to me. Bethe Correia, I don't think she beats Kat Zingano. I don't think she beats Sarah McMahon. I don't think she beats Miesha Tate. Had the finish over Shayna Baszler in her last fight, was able to corner her and then, I think landed a shot to the body and had a nice finishing combination. But, so what, really? I mean, Shayna Baszler was on tough and lost. Her debut fight in the UFC, I thought she lost that fight to Julie Kedzie. I really did. And then who'd she fight in between? Jessamyn Duke. And, that wasn't a terribly dominant performance. I mean, she won, but again, who's Jessamyn Duke? Ronda Rousey, I don't think people really get it. She comes in with that judo background, obviously very proficient there. And, she has put in the work with her striking. You saw it against Sarah McMahon. Yeah, early stoppage, but, she landed that knee and put her down. And then she comes out and knocks out Alexis Davis. She has great hand speed. Tate was able to push her a little bit on the feet, but she's really improving there. And even if this fight just stays on the feet, I still think I'd favor Rousey. And I don't know what makes people think that she can't just Rousey can't just run straight at her, grab hold and throw her down and submit her. Like she did to Kat Zingano and everyone else. So going with Rousey, first round submission. I'll be shocked if that's not how it goes down. If it goes past the first round, I'll be shocked. Ronda Rousey's judo, I think it really is like it's the equivalent of Royce Gracie's jiu-jitsu back in the early days of the UFC. I just think it's one of these skills, at least in the women's division, that people just can't deal with. It's this rare skill set. It's a very dominant skill she has. She has a lifetime, of perfecting it, and she's so lethal with it. And again, here and there, Tate was able to, push her a little bit in both fights, especially the second one. But in the end, people just can't overcome that. And we haven't seen Correia grapple, and we haven't seen her be really dominant on the feet, against kind of low-level fighters like Duke and Julie Kedzie. So Ronda Rousey, I think she's just going to come out, tie up, get the judo throw, armbar. So Ronda Rousey first round submission. All right, guys, those are my predictions for UFC 190, Rousey versus Correia. Thank you for watching. A bit of a long video. Try to keep it shorter next time, but we have 2 more events in August. Teixeira versus St. Preux fight night, and at the end of the month, Oliveira versus Holloway. I'll have my predictions out for both very soon. Thank you guys for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.